we're not going to become business owners if we're the ones going to the house to show it to potential tenants, or we're not the ones doing the painting or the cleaning or things like that. Like, we are not going to grow and really 10x when we're spending our time doing this like manual labor, low level, where we need to be present for things.
Welcome. I'm Amrita, and this is the Amrita Effect. Real conversations about identity, resilience, and becoming for women in the middle of figuring themselves out or finding their way back to who they really are. This episode is made possible with the support from the following sponsors. Fabio Gula at Luminant Bank. If you're thinking about buying or refinancing, Fabio offers over 35 years of experience and helps match you with the right loan, not just a one-size-fits-all. And Tyler McBroom at TRM CPA. They are a proactive CPA company helping business owners maximize profits and pay as little tax as legally possible. Main Street Title. They deliver your title on time, every time. And last but not least, Lauren DiCarlo at Zingarli and DiCarlo. If you have any real estate transactions for buying or selling, reach out to them for representation. Hello, friends. It's Amrita, and welcome to the Amrita Effect. Today, we have a special guest, Adrienne Green, who I'm so excited to have, who is a friend of mine, but also a very badass entrepreneur in the real estate industry. So, you know, we talk about women who are making transitions, and you don't necessarily have to be from the real estate world to relate to transition. And I think Adrienne has such a lovely story and a very unique story that I thought she would be such a great asset to have on the show to bring all of her nuggets to you guys. So Adrienne is a real estate entrepreneur, speaker, and a coach, and she helps business owners automate operations and scale with wealth. And as a founder of Workergenics and Invest Away, she specializes in virtual assistant placements and private lending solutions. Her expertise centers on business systemization, scaling virtual teams, and strategic capital leverage. So welcome, Adrienne. I'm so happy you're here.
Hello. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for you and your podcast. This is wonderful.
Yes, it's gonna be a hit. I am so excited to have you here because I think your journey is such a unique journey. So, probably something I've never heard anybody else do. So I'm like waiting. I'm like very excited to dive into it. So before we actually get into the questions, tell us a little bit about like quick synopsis of where you were and what led you to where you are now.
Well, I would love to say that it was, strategic planning and having a big vision and working toward it and all those things that we learn to do as entrepreneurs. I did not have that when I got started, and yet I still survived. I probably could have gone further faster if I did use those strategies, but pretty much quick synopsis is I originally started working in business and finance, didn't love being in the office, became a high school math teacher, loved helping people. I'm a teacher at heart, didn't necessarily love the bureaucracy and the other parts of, having to work for someone else. And so that led to renting out my basement, which was kind of like the gateway to real estate and real estate investing, which gave me the freedom that I really wanted. So got into real estate investing, became a real estate agent as a part of my investing journey. Through my experience with VAs as a real estate agent, we started this VA agency company. And now no longer an active agent. I only refer people. I sold my real estate agent team, actually. And now we travel the world internationally full-time with my family while we run the businesses that we do have virtually from wherever we are.
Okay, so you are a world traveler with kids. So let's just pause there for a moment because I think that's such a unique thing. Give us a little insight into what that's like. What are you doing for school and how are they adapting to the change and the traveling, and how do you function that way?
Right. And so when we started, my kids were 8, 6, and like my youngest turned 4 a couple weeks after we started. So 8, 6, and 4. And it was a little daunting. While I had been a teacher before, I had taught high school, not littles. And they had been in school for the last few years. Like my older two had been in a Montessori school. My youngest was in preschool. And so it was like, okay, we're going to start homeschooling and we also have online businesses and we're going to travel. How's this going to go? And honestly, I was nervous about the school piece, and it has gone so much better than I anticipated. My kids get their academics done, and they have all this time to lean into their passions and their interests. So my oldest, my daughter, who's now 10, she has self-taught herself how to crochet. She's really into crafting and art, and she just watches YouTube videos or things like that and teaches herself. My middle loves chess and he gets to practice and learn every day because he has the time to do that. And my youngest, I mean, he's 6 now. He loves life and has a ton of fun. But yes, so it was a little scary. It's gone better than we anticipated. I absolutely love it. And it's takes some of the time to plan the logistics. I will say we're not like on vacation all the time, right? Like the kids have to learn. My husband and I work and run our businesses. So we tend to, well, we'll have vacation bits. Overall, our travel tends to be, 1 to 2 months, maybe 3 within a certain city. And then we'll move on to somewhere else. That way we really get to settle. We get to get into like the day-to-day routine and get our work done while also learning about the city, doing the special things there on, evenings and weekends.
Okay, okay. I have so much to ask. So, do you have a headquarters that is home, or it's you're just going from one home to another?
We do not have what they call like a home base at this point in time. So we've been traveling for over 2 years now. It's getting closer to 2.5. And we rented out our primary residence and just we usually rent on Airbnbs. We do have short-term rentals that we have on Home Exchange. So sometimes we do home exchanges as well, where we get points when people stay at our short-term rentals in like the off season, and then we can use those points to stay other places. And of course, when we're on vacation type travel, sometimes we stay in hotels. But nope, we've really just been all over, which has its pros and cons. Like the pro is my kids have been to 6 continents, and at the end of this year, it'll be something like 19 or 20 countries. The con is when we go to these great places and we want souvenirs or things like that, we really can't take them because we're not going to a home base where we can drop them off or anything like that. But other than the stuff piece, it hasn't been too bad.
Oh, it's just making me think like so you live a very minimalist life in terms of the stuff you have too, like from clothing to accessories, like you don't just buy a pair of shoes to go with one outfit almost, right? Like you would have to minimize what you have because you're traveling with it.
I have 3 pairs of shoes total, and that's a lot for travelers. But pretty much, I have a pair of sandals, a pair of like sneakers, and then a pair of flats. Yeah.
Wow. This is so fascinating for me. Like I've never met anybody who's actually a world traveler all the time, all year round. That's so cool. So I'm curious to know how is it for the kids not like being a part of a sports team or being a part of a tribe of kids like you have in social environments at school or like steady friendships, right? Even if I have a home base and my kids are being homeschooled, we're still in the same neighborhood, so they get to play with the same kids and they develop relationships and friendships. How is that for the kids and for you?
So overall, we do go into new places, and some of them we're able to connect with a community of kids or things like that. Sometimes not. It depends on the location, what the culture is there, and if there's a lot of English speakers. So when we spent 3 months in Hoi An, Vietnam is kind of like a world schooling unofficial hub. Like a lot of people go there because it just works well and like the resources they have. So we stayed at an oceanfront resort in like a serviced apartment there. Like we had a 3 bedroom, 2 bath apartment, and all these other like international families would be there too. Like maybe for a couple weeks, maybe for a couple months, and the kids could go play in the play area, run on the grass, play in the pool. And there was kind of like an unofficial community of like some people who had events, right? Like a soccer club or things like that there that the kids, do while they were there if they wanted. So we've been places like that where the kids, and they love it. They love having friends and everything. And then we've also been places like Japan where there wasn't really a community there. English speaking is less common than it is in other countries. And that was time for us to really connect more as a family. So the positive of this travel, and one of the reasons I wanted to do it, is I feel like while you say, and it's true, like your kids have a community at your home and everything, that also means they have less time as siblings, right? Because they're with their friend groups that are age specific. And unless you've got twins, your kids aren't the same age, right? They're not in the same class. They're not on the same sports team. And parents are often running around like crazy. Well, this kid's baseball is 7 o'clock tonight. This kid's baseball is 8 o'clock tonight. And so while the kids get time with like peers, it also means less time with family. So while we do have some time with peers, we also get a lot more time with family, which was important to me because I really want my children to grow up to be each other's like best friends and really feel like they're each other's teammates. So that's something that we've really been able to lean into and foster and do in a way that would have been very difficult in a conventional US setup.
100%. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think the thing that you guys have because of your living situation and traveling is this whole aspect of different cultures and and exposing them to different environments where they have to learn to uh, almost communicate differently in every different country, or um, build the build the like not the personality, but they need a set of tools almost that a kid in a regular neighborhood in the same neighborhood would not develop because they're not traveling the world, right? Like just the skill of traveling, let alone dealing with the culture that comes with the place you're living in for that 2 months, and then picking up and then going to the next country, which could be completely different, and then having to adapt to that. Like that skill in itself wouldn't will not my kids will not have because they don't have that exposure. So there's definitely obviously pros and cons to it all, but what I think you'd be such a great test case scenario on how your kids turn out. And I think they'd be so rich in culture, right? Like where I feel like my kids wouldn't. And I always say like they have access to Amazon and all these other things that give them instant gratification and the stuff they have, the amount of shit they have, and living a minimum, like I mean, just do like simple comparisons. I'm like so blown away with it. I think it's such a cool thing. So what happened that like made you say we're just going to travel the world, we're not going to live in one zip code anymore? What caused that?
So, the idea of taking some time and traveling internationally has always been something that I've wanted to do, and my husband has always been okay with that. We thought that it would be something we did when the kids were a little older. I envisioned when my daughter, finished up at the elementary school she was at in like 5th or 6th grade, maybe we'd take a year then. They all would be old enough they could read and write, and homeschool would be super simple and everything like that. But then I decided in August of 2023 that I wanted to sell my real estate team. I had gone to a real estate conference and I walked out of it and I said, these are great ideas and I do not care to implement any of them. It's time for me to sell my team. Like, I don't want to solve these problems anymore. And so I sold my team in about 2 months. And while we were in the process of selling that team, when my husband and I were having one of our like routine monthly family finance meetings where we kind of talk about planning and everything, my husband was like, all of our other businesses, we've set up our entire life where it doesn't require our presence, which is really something we had been doing since like 2019 with our properties, with everything like that. It was like, and it was because we realized our time is not like we're not going to become business owners if we're the ones going to the house to show it to potential tenants, or we're not the ones doing the painting or the cleaning or things like that. Like, we are not going to grow and really 10x when we're spending our time doing this like manual labor, low level, where we need to be present for things. And so we'd really been building everything, our mindset, our structures, our lives since 2019 to, does this need my physical presence or not? And so in 2023, the only thing that really required my physical presence was my real estate agent team. I did have to show up for those weekly meetings. I did have to meet with them in person. And there was like a psychological effect for the culture that we were in and everything to do that. And so he was like, we could do the travel that we talked about once you finish selling the team. And it was daunting because, well, it was like a someday goal and it became a, oh, we're doing it now. And yet it was like, this makes sense. So like, if we're logical people, this is what we're going to do. So we left in February of 2024. We said we would do 1 year. And when we were about 6 months in, because we do typically, as a family of five, we do plan typically 6 to 9 months out for our travel to get the Airbnbs so that we can have them for an entire month. And, a weekend isn't booked and blocking it out or things like that. So 6 months in, we met as a family and said, hey guys, like we're, we're starting to plan past a year. Like, do we want to go back to where we were? Do we want to go have a different home base, or do you want to keep doing this? And everybody in the family was like, let's keep doing this. And so that's what we've done. And like I said, we're coming up on 2.5 years now. And while there is like travel logistics and things like that that people might be daunted by, there's also a whole lot that got taken off of our plate by not being in the US. So, like dealing with a car, dealing with car maintenance, dealing with car insurance, all of that. We don't have to deal with that. Dealing with health insurance. I know that's something that, people talk about a lot, dealing with the payments and all this and getting things approved. We don't have to deal with health insurance because healthcare is so easy outside of the United States. We just go and pay cash. And while we do have a travel health insurance policy, nothing has even come up that's worth like submitting a claim. So there's a lot of things. We don't have to deal with sports schedules. We don't have to deal with like the carpool, any of that. And so there's a lot that gets taken off of our plate where honestly, we do our like actual job work like for our businesses, and the kids do their homeschool, and then it's like, okay, what fun stuff do we want to do? What site do we want to see? Do we want to just go walk through the park? Things like that.
I'm like blown away. And I'm thinking about like, okay, my kid went through the Invisalign process, or like um, OIT for like nut allergy process, which requires like sometimes years. Like one of my kids went through the shots for allergy, right? Getting exposed to that allergy so he can become immune to it. That was a 3-year process. So have you had any scenarios with the kids from a medical standpoint where they needed like braces, for example? How would that work?
So I was wondering because my daughter definitely got my teeth genes and was going to need braces, and the we actually did Invisalign. So while we were in Vietnam for 3 months, we did the initial Invisalign process there, where they do the scans, they make the initial round of trays, and then right before we left. She got scanned. They made the next set of trays, which we left in end of March, and those trays will take us until October. And then in the fall, we'll have to find a place that is an Invisalign, dentist orthodontist to get scanned again, and they'll send those scans back to the dentist in Vietnam, and they either will go back to Vietnam or they'll make the trays and they can mail them internationally to us. And that's been the only like ongoing thing that has popped up, is needing to get that dental work done. Yeah.
Okay. So you just got to get creative a little. Like it doesn't sound, yeah, okay. Okay. It's just like a whole other world. I'm just like, how would that
It
even
is.
work?
It is. And the braces orthodontia is one of the things that in the because there's actually Facebook groups. There's Facebook groups for like world schoolers, as they call it, when you're traveling with kids. Digital nomad tends to be another term. It's more when people don't have kids. But yeah, there's whole discussions for how to handle those logistics. And usually there's someone around who's solved it and can share their wisdom.
So that right there to me is like, I love the fact, no matter where you are, the amount of resources we have available in terms of information and communities, even online. Like you don't need to know moms that are living this life of traveling, but there's honestly a Facebook group for really anything almost. Like I didn't know there was a Facebook group for that, but like there is, of course there is, because there's many people who do this. I'm sure. I just haven't met them, but there is, and like this is to me is it's so empowering because nothing really should hold us back, even if it's something so out of the ordinary. And you can find a tribe anywhere really to get access to, because you're not the first one doing it, right? Somebody's already done it and can share their tidbits with you. So your husband was on board, and this was your passion, but he was on board. So I think that obviously helped execute it, right, and move along this path. And then your kids enjoyed the experience, so you continued it. Can you talk a little bit about when you were first making this transition? Because I would imagine it came with a lot of uncertainty and questions and like the what ifs thoughts, right? Like what if the kids hate it? What are we going to do? This is a commitment for X number of months at least. And you rented out your house initially. Like talk us through the transition period and what that was like.
Right. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is lots and lots of trips to donate things to the thrift store. And the crazy thing, you talked about living a minimal lifestyle now. So we were going to rent out our primary residence. We rented it out furnished, and we were doing this like at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. We had only moved into that house in February 2021. Okay, so we lived in this house for 3 years total. And yet we had, and we're not like, I'm not even like a huge buyer. And yet we had so much stuff that it was like, this isn't worth like putting into a storage unit. And, it's not a keepsake for the future. It's not something that, a tenant would want in a furnished rental. So it's either being sold or it's going to the thrift store, right? And it was just shocking how much stuff we had like that. uh, it's just the American culture. One thing I've really recognized, especially as we do international travel, is how much the American culture is a consumption culture, right? And so that was one of the first things, was just like, oh my goodness, we've been here for 3 years. We have so much stuff. And so that was one of the things in making that decision. And for my kids too, especially my daughter is, she loves her stuff, right? Different people have different emotional attachments to possessions. She's a high emotional attachment to possession. It was multiple rounds of going through her stuff with her to say, what is a keepsake? What's not? Um, so and recognizing, like, part of what I think a great thing by spending all this time together as a family is recognizing everybody in the family and what they need, right? How they function and what makes them happy and makes them their best is something that was like a specific example that's like been a bigger theme. But that was part of it. And then we did, I was really intentional that we incorporated the children into the planning process, right? We don't want to go somewhere that they're going to hate, right? Or that we're going to hate. So we did incorporate them into the planning process. And sometimes it was difficult. So again, my kids all chose a place they wanted to go, and my daughter chose Japan. And Japan is really hard to plan for, like, not just a vacation, right? We were going to stay there for like a month or two. We ended up doing 2 months. It's hard because we're a family of five, and Japanese live in small places. They tend to have small families. And it was like there was a point at which I was like, should we just abandon planning Japan? Like, should we just cut it off the list? But I was like, no, my daughter really wants to go there. And so we made it happen. And we all love Japan. It is now one of like our top favorite places. I will say living there for, extended periods is tough because we work from home. We homeschool, we work from home, and that's not what the Japanese culture is set up for. And so it's not what their houses are set up for. Their houses are set up for people to go to an office to work, for people to go to school. Like, homeschooling isn't a thing in Japan. So the houses are small. You're not like going to find an Airbnb with like a nice desk and desk chair or anything like that. So there were some things that came up like that really taught us a lot about the culture in these different places as well. So those were some of the challenges, and some places are easier than others. Doesn't mean that they're more fulfilling, but some places are easier because they're more aligned with our lifestyle, for sure.
Sure. So I'm going to rewind a little bit because you said something about renting out your basement. So another term for that I'm familiar with is the house hacking, right? Where you take your primary home and you rent out a space in that home while you're still living there. And it's such a brilliant thing to do. Tell me a little bit about that. Did you have kids at home at that point? How long did you do that? Did they have a separate entrance? Like, talk to us about that.
Right. So in 2013, my husband and I bought what we thought would be our forever home, right? This was in Northern Virginia. It was a home on acreage. I've always really cared about a healthy lifestyle, and this was a place where we could like grow our own food. We ended up having like livestock and everything because we had 11 acres. And so it was like going to be our forever home, but it was just my husband, myself, and our dogs at that point in time, right? We had no kids yet or anything. And so after a few months there, and now one of the things about moving out to acreage is I was still teaching at the school by our old house. So now I had like a 30 to 45-minute commute each way on a not very pleasant road. And that was if I timed it right, where, because as a school teacher, I didn't have to do rush hour. But heaven forbid I actually leave school around rush hour because that became a lot longer. And so I started to feel that pressure of not having freedom, right? Of the lack of freedom that comes with working for someone else. So I started to think about, how could I love teaching, but I didn't love the commute. I didn't love the bureaucracy of teaching in public school. Is like, what could give me some other options here? And that, coupled with the fact that we lived in this house for a few months before we even like, and never went in the basement. Like we were only going in the basement to go to the utility room to like check on the utilities there. We had to like, look at the well pump or clean the water filter from the well every once in a while. And I was like, this is a walkout basement. The prior owners already had it like plumbed to have a wet bar, so we could really easily put a kitchenette in there. Maybe we could rent that out, make some extra money, and it could start to be the option or the path to freedom for me not having to continue to teach in the public school. It could be some options to teaching online or some other things where I'd have a dip in income, but this basement rental could make it up. Now, I did not come from a real estate family. I did not come from an entrepreneurial family. I came from a family of W-2, work for someone else. And I also come from a family where like, what's the worst that could happen? That's what they think about, right? Like, what's the worst that could happen? What could be all the drama of having someone in your basement? And so I really had to intentionally focus on the fact that a couple of my husband's coworkers were rented stuff. Like they had kept their old houses when they moved and they rent them out and self-managed. And I was like, and it's okay. So that was like, I clung to those examples of people who'd done it and were fine and it helped them financially. And I also clung to the idea that this isn't forever, right? First off, we can make the lease and list it for rent. And if we don't get a tenant that we like, because it is like, the rules about fair housing and everything are different when it's a property you live in. So you have a lot of control and autonomy in there. And I was like, we don't have to say yes to anyone, right? Like, if we don't find somebody we want to live in the basement that we're comfortable with, we don't have to say yes. And then even once we do say yes, it's a 1 year lease, right? It's a 1 year commitment. If we don't like this, if we don't like having people here, then we don't have to do it again in the future. So those were a couple things that helped me because I was definitely outside of my comfort zone. This was something I had not done before, family members had not done before, or anything like that. But it ended up being fabulous. Honestly, it ended up being great because the income did help. It was the easiest money we made. And so I was like, oh, and that led to us doing more investment properties, right? And more real estate. And then also, we talked about community a little bit. We lived on 11 acres. All of our neighbors had acreage too. It was kind of nice to have some people around. Like there was plenty of space, right? American houses are huge. Like there's plenty of space. And it was just my husband and I in this huge house at the time. So it was really nice. And we continued to rent that out, honestly, until we left that house in 2020. We had all three of my kids while we lived in that house. There was still plenty of space for us and the rest of the house upstairs. And some of our past tenants like continue to be friends. We're friends on Facebook. Like sometimes we visited them when we've gone to where they live now or things like that.
So cool. So I want to pause there and reflect on something because you took a risk. It's not like you said, you didn't come from a real estate or entrepreneurial background. You didn't come from a family that did house hacking and you watched it happening. And, there were two thoughts in your mind. What if this is a nightmare? But then you also chose, I feel like you intentionally chose to also speak to those that did it and it was not a problem at all, like your husband's coworkers, right? So I feel like whenever we are in a transition mode or we're looking to do something we haven't done before, and that's anybody for anything, it doesn't matter what the topic is, our fear is going to be loud. But I feel like if we can intentionally bring the curiosity as loud and separate ourselves from the thoughts, which is a very hard concept that I'm actually just starting to really explore, that we are not our thoughts. Which to me before, if you spoke to me even 6 months ago, I'd be like, what do you mean? I don't understand what that means. But we are not our thoughts. These are just thoughts. And if you could separate yourself from the thought itself and look at the fear that's talking and saying, oh my God, this could be a disaster. Or look at the thought of, well, you know, Jimmy did it and he's not having a problem and it's fine. So which one do I want to listen to, or which one do I want to lean into? And you chose to lean into a positive one, not because you had any evidence, not because you had proof that it was going to be okay because your mom and dad did it, but you took a little bit of a risk. And I think that that in itself right there is such a concept for us all that are listening to think about, because we're constantly facing that no matter what the transition is, whether it's job, divorce, marriage, kids, whatever, starting a business or doing something unique like this. So I just wanted to pause there and reflect on that, because I think that that was such a smart thing that you did that basically set you up on a completely different trajectory of where you are right now. If you hadn't done that, I don't know if the road would have shifted in this direction for you.
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't there was no like big 5-year plan for it. There was no like, so many people when they get into real estate now, they're going to like binge, bigger pockets or some other source like that. And then they get stuck in like analysis paralysis. There was none of that. It was, this is going to help us right now. And so we're just going to take this next right step and see where that leads. And I will say, Amrita, when I decided to sell my real estate team, I did that same very intentional thing of like, not many people, as you know, selling a real estate agent team, like it's not super common. You like, it's not super common. I didn't know anybody else who'd done it at all. Like same thing. And so I could have like stressed out about the fact that it's not super common, that I didn't know anybody who did it, that I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. And I instead intentionally was like, this is what I'm being called to do. So I know it's going to be successful. And I intentionally like put into my brain, like, this is going to go great. This is going to be successful. Like, this is going to be amazing. We're going to figure out a way to make it happen. And it happened in like 2 months. And so I really do think that focusing on that positive and focusing on what it's going to, like what that's going to bring really makes a difference in how things are accomplished. And I think we do have to be really intentional about doing that, because I mean, if you think about in the US, like what does the news want to tell you about? Everything that's bad, because that's what gets clicks, right? And everything like that. And so we're just surrounded with a culture that tends to talk about the what if and the worst case scenario. And so I would just say for all the listeners today, like how can you instead see the positive side of every situation and bring that into being?
Yeah, rewiring the brain. That's my like term right now, is that's what we need to do more of, because we've had this outdated programming that isn't necessarily a healthy one. Some components of it may be great, but we need to rewire. And I'm like working on that personally, and with my son, who who is on this ADHD journey with me. Like, we need to rewire our brain. We need to think with the glass half full. Um, so you stepped away from this hustle that you were in with the real estate life. Like, the real estate life is just constant hustle. How do we recognize when our ambition, which is what it starts off with, has turned into this unhealthy grind? And I don't know if yours turned into an unhealthy grind at some point, but what are your thoughts around that?
That is a great question, and I haven't gotten it before. So this is an off the cuff answer. But the first thing is, I, for me, when I was like deciding to sell my real estate team and get out of it, I felt like the thing that I didn't feel inspired anymore. That was one of the things, right? Before I had felt inspired, right? When we think of visionaries and integrators, right? From that kind of traction mindset, I can be a fabulous visionary. Like I can have all these big ideas. Just ask my husband. Right? I'm like, oh, let's do this, and this. And I was at the point where I felt like all my ideas had burned out, right? When it came to the real estate agent team. And so that was part of it, is just things felt like obligations rather than an opportunity to solve a new problem. So, that relates back to that mindset piece before, right? I wasn't feeling like all these positives and all these great things could happen. I was kind of like, ugh, right? Just burned out. And the thing is that the other piece is I really did feel like it was such a sudden shift of like, I'm going to sell this real estate team, that it was like, this was God was saying, this is what I was supposed to do. And so I think and it's hard in, again, like American culture, we are taught to be, and I'm very logical, we're taught to be super logical, super like, we're going to plan everything out, we're going to execute step by step by step. And there's a lot of value in that. And there's value in intuition. And there's value in like listening to the messages that you're getting from God, the universe. And so that was a part of it too. And so I'd say when people are feeling like in that place, maybe there are a few lessons or thoughts there that could help.
Okay. Now, you obviously came from this journey of like building these businesses, which I'll ask you I'll ask you also what those businesses are because we're all curious about that. But like, you're building this life of wealth while traveling and living a minimalist lifestyle, right? So building true wealth can feel very intimidating for women. What's a realistic first step for a woman who's listening and feeling financially stuck? What is the first step she could take to getting unstuck?
Well, and this is going to be kind of funny, I think, on the heels of what I last said. Honestly, a lot of I think the fear related to money is not knowing, right? We're fearful of things because we don't know what we have. We don't know where it's going, and so we freak out, right? Or we're just uncomfortable. And so, I think for myself and for others that I've seen, the first step is really inventorying where you are financially. So think of like a business, especially if somebody is an entrepreneur, like, well, hopefully you've got like your accounting software, QuickBooks or something like that, and you've got your key financial statements, right? You've got like your profit and loss or your income statement, your balance sheet, and your statement of cash flows. And we look at those for our business, but we don't look at those for our personal lives. And so that's what I would suggest if somebody was, for a woman who's feeling uncomfortable with her finances, is start to make those. Like, and let's just start with the balance sheet. So what assets do you have and what liabilities do you have? So what do you have that has money, right? The equity in your house, equity in your cars, right? Maybe valuable jewelry, the money in your different like bank accounts. And then what liabilities do you have? And that's your loans, your mortgages, your car loan, credit card, whatever that is. And start to see, and at the bottom, when you take your assets minus your liabilities, you get your net worth. And so I think if you start to do the balance sheet, the income statement, right? And then the statement of cash flows is like your budget. So if you don't have a budget, if you're uncomfortable with money, then maybe making a budget and tracking where your money goes. Because once you have that data, then you're empowered to change it if you want. So if you track where your money goes and you're like, hey, I'm happy with this, awesome. Keep it where it is. If you track where your money goes and you're like, oh my gosh, I really spend that much on eating out every month, well, then change it. Now you've got the data and that can empower you. And I would say, don't feel the guilt. Like, there's no guilt of like, I spend $4,000 a month eating out. Like, nobody's judging you for that except
Yeah.
yourself. So let go of the guilt. It's now a number, it's now data, and you can change that by changing your behavior.
Amazing. Amazing. It's so powerful to understand that like creating passive income where the money works for you, it can change how we value our time, our energy, and what we're doing with that time. Like in certain cultures, I feel like money is such a taboo, or even in certain faiths, right? Money is a taboo. But if you're not attached to it, like that's the key in my mind. If you're not attached to it, it doesn't own you, but it just works for you. Like how powerful is that? That's so cool. And just a quick, thought about as you were talking, like just creating a P&L can sound so intimidating for someone who doesn't even know what it is or how to create one. So any of those financial tools you just mentioned to create, like the spreadsheets, it's not hard. You can use ChatGPT now. You can plug in your credit card statements, whatever, however you're spending your money, just plug it in and it will create it for you. Like what are the three documents to create P&L?
Yeah, the P&L, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. And Claude makes beautiful spreadsheets. So I have been loving Claude for things like that for sure.
Yeah. So Claude is probably better than Chat to do something like that, to create that from the data you give it. So don't be intimidated. If that's the one small step you can take today when you leave is plug in your credit card statements into Claude and make it produce these spreadsheets. That's a great starting point. So I'm glad you brought that up. Tell us about the businesses that you're running remotely all over the world.
So we have The first, Workergenics, is our virtual assistant business. And that really came, it's so funny because all these things, again, it wasn't like we did, what's the best business to start? These all came organically from our lives and from seeing problems that we were solving. So when I started into 2020, I relocated to a new market, and as a real estate agent, that's intimidating because I had no sphere of influence or where you traditionally get business. And so one of the things that I did in this new market is, as soon as I had something under contract, I brought on a virtual assistant to handle all of the operations and busy work, because there's a lot of paperwork and back end stuff that an agent has to do. And that freed me up to do the top 20% of like lead gen, the things only I could do that grew my business. So I did over 50 transactions in 6 months, and I was going back to my brokerage, and that's why I started the team. Well, my husband, who's a computer engineer by training, he saw this and he was like, all of these other business owners we know in the city, we see on like the local business Facebook group, they're all trying to get assistance. They're offering more than a VA would cost, and they just don't know how to use a virtual assistant instead of someone local. But now they're paying more, they're dealing with higher turnover, they're dealing with a limited pool of applicants because it has to be someone local, right? And so he had the idea of starting this VA business so that we can help bridge that gap between the entrepreneurs who need, and we specifically focus on like an executive assistant, which was that first hire I had, was in that role, right? It's somebody who's going to help with taking stuff off your plate as the business owner or the entrepreneur. And so he started that business in beginning of 2022, and that's what eventually led to him stepping away from his engineering role. And now I run that business because he focuses on our private money lending business, Investaway, which again came from a need. As a real estate agent, I worked with a lot of investors. I really niched down to investors. That was my thing. And investors would need hard money loans or private money loans when they're flipping or burring, when they're buying a house and, renovating it. And the service that we would get from the lenders available was laughable, right? Like I would do email, well, my VA would do email intros and the lender would never reply. Or they would say the day before closing, oh, our appraiser never got in there, so we're going to be delayed at least 2 weeks, or things like that. And so we started, when my husband left his engineering job, we were able to roll his retirement over to a self-directed IRA, and we could start lending to these investors who needed to do these renovations. And that way we could provide better service. And it was really coming from helping my clients as a real estate agent. So again, not some big plan about, oh, this is going to give us a certain return. But that was in 2022 as well. And as we always look at the numbers over time, it's like, this is doing really well. And we're able to help people, right? We help these investors who are doing this hard work. We're helping the community by really taking some houses that no one should live in and making them nice and safe and beautiful. And then we're also getting good returns. So it's a win-win-win. So in 2025, we really built out all of the back end to make it scalable. And so now we take in JV investors who also get to partake in this opportunity and get the returns. And that way we can also help more borrowers as well and improve more houses. So we've been scaling that since like the end of 2025. And my husband leads that day to day while I lead our Workergenics VA business.
So cool. So now you're in a position where you're actually looking for investors to come into play with you while you lend money to investors. So like, it's almost, yeah, it's like full-blown business in its own that started off as a thing you were doing with just your money, and now you're bringing in other people's money to do it as well with returns for them. So for those women that may have a little lump sum of money laying there trying to figure out what to do passively, this could be a great opportunity. And where can these women find you as we conclude? Like, where can we find you so we can maybe talk to you about even just picking your brain on this life that you've built from a coaching standpoint, or the whole investor side of it?
The best place to go is my website, adriennegreen.com. And for all the listeners on that page, I do have a time and freedom starter pack that walks you through, if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed with whatever your life is. This walks you through an inventory with some tools to help you get your time back and start to create some freedom so you can really live an aligned life with what you want to be doing and living. So adriennegreen.com is the best. And yes, Amrita, I will note with Investaway, So it's, as you know, in the real estate investing space, you go to any conference, anything like that, it's 70% men. And so we've been very intentional with InvestAway to support women investors, both those women investors who are boots on the ground doing that work on the houses, and also women investors who are the ones who want the passive investments. So overall, on both sides of that, 70% of our investors that we're working with are either women on their own or they're women in the team, like a husband wife duo or something like that. So we have a system that really supports women in real estate investing. So I am really proud of that. And it's something that we are really intentional to set up our systems so that we support women who are typically, marginalized in this space.
Okay, so if there's a woman who's listening, what's the minimal amount? And this may be a loaded question because it might depend on the project that you're on because it's project specific, right? But what's the minimum amount that she would need to bring to the table to dip her toes into something like this to see if she can go in deeper? And it may be that, she wants to start off small or she just doesn't have the capital to put in. So what's the minimal amount?
We ask for a minimum of a $50,000 investment. So that's a lot lower than a lot of other syndications or other alternatives you would have for passive investing. So we ask for 50,000. And what I would note is that this can be something that you have in retirement. So if you have an IRA or something like that where you've ever left a job and you like rolled over the money, or maybe you haven't yet, but you could. If you've ever left a job where you had a retirement account, you could use that money for this type of investing, and that is a good place to do it as well. So it's not like it has to just be cash in your checking account or anything. Well, I was going to tell you, let me tell you a little bit more about like why we love this niche, which I think is going to answer your questions. So the cool
Okay.
thing about like if a woman wants to invest with us is we're I would say one of the few passive choices where it's not a huge time commitment. Typically it's 9 months or less that your money is like in a loan, because we are just financing someone buying and renovating the house. Then they're either going to sell it or they're going to refinance it. So it's not like when you do a syndication or other things and you're like 5 to 7 years down the road, we're going to sell. Nope. Your money is going to be back to you with your return in 9 months max. And you can choose if you want to roll that into another loan or if you want to cash out and take it out. So there's a lot of autonomy and flexibility there that other options don't have. The other thing is we are, and this gets a little technical, but we are first lien position on these properties. And so that means if something was to go sideways or returns were down or the housing market slowed or some chaos happened, when that house is sold or refinanced, our loan gets paid off before anyone else. And so that's different if you're in a syndication and you're like a limited partner, an LP, you're not getting paid until the loan's getting paid and all these other people potentially are getting paid. When you invest with us, we are always, always first lien position, meaning you're getting paid with us before anyone else gets paid on the sale of that house. And that's another benefit. And then we're averaging pretty great returns. So double-digit returns when you look at them annualized, and people can reach out for the specifics. Happy to have a conversation, but it's double-digit returns. So between 10 and 20%, let's say.
That was my next question. So what, you just read my mind. So like so many powerful nuggets in this. I like want to go on and, I also want to make these episodes consumable. So maybe we'll just have to bring you back on later at some point. I think you're filled with so much info and knowledge and wisdom that is so helpful to everyone that's listening. It's definitely like opened up my eyes in so many ways. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out to sharing all this wisdom with us. We appreciate you.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, guys. It was great having you. If you want to reach out to Adrienne, please do so. Reach out to her on her website. Download that packet that you were talking about is a free packet of information and toolkit that you were talking about. Perfect. So do that. That's your one step, right? Like listen to the curiosity, bring that to the forefront, download this packet that can help you build a life that you actually love. Thank you for joining us. And until next time. That's a wrap on another episode of the Amrita Effect. Nothing is wrong with you. You are just in the middle of becoming. If this resonated with you, please share it and subscribe. And if you could, leave a review so this reaches more women who need it. Just take one small step forward, and I'll see you in the next episode.